1. Got a countdown before it says live because apparently there's some latency and I don't want to just be staring at everybody. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back once again. It is Thursday, June 20th, 2024. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your Thursday evening, your Friday Eve evening, for coming in to talk some tropical update with us here on the Weather Center. Also, happy first official calendar day of summer. We've officially rocked our way into summer. Not the meteorological summer, but today is officially the summer solstice. The sun is still shining bright outside. In fact, I don't even know why I have my spotlights on. It's so weird seeing it as bright as it is. It feels like it's still 6 in the afternoon. I have a second wind after getting off of work. So today is going to be one of the longest daytime, one of the longest daylight periods of the entire year as we rock and roll into summer. And I just want to say, if you guys aren't stopping, even for just a brief 5-second period each and every day to just marinate in what it is that you have going on, marinate in the positives, marinate in the, blissful aura, wherever it is that you draw it in from, I would highly encourage you start doing that. And the main reason I say this is because I need to be an advocate for my own words and I need to start taking my own advice because, shoot, I remember when we were on the channel and we were talking about spring and winter's almost over. Is winter over? And now, shoot, we're over here saying, yep, it's officially summer, June 20th. So time is rocking and rolling, folks, and we are just going to keep blasting through the hurricane season, and we still have a lot in store for us. We're getting started with a couple of instances of activity, but this is not all the hurricane season is going to throw at us. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and very quickly say hello to a few folks. The chat is popping off, and I do sincerely thank you guys for joining in. TRG, Rich Perez, Chris, Coney Floralis, Kevin Rivera, Lawrence Edwards, PEXTT, Sabrina Marshall, Zen, Super Charas, Thomas Dellinger, My Mind Over Your Matter, Linda, The Hive, Jay, Clayton Keeney, M. Mr. Man J, Soulful Sawyer, Eyewall Addict, TG Herman, Everyday Laguna Madre, Yorkie Forever Board, Tyrone St. Clair, everybody in the chat. Pleasure to have everybody. Pleasure to see Pleasure to see the chat popping off. Sharon Tully, good to see you as well. I'm going to expedite, or I'm going to pop out the chat so I have it right here in front of my face so I don't miss anything. And let's rock this out, all right, ladies and gentlemen? Disturbance number 1, AL92. We haven't had as many updates today as I thought we were going to have. But we have gotten some updates. We are still slowly but surely continue to uptick in its potential. Not only did we designate this as an invest area for folks, if you were joining me or if you didn't get to join me yesterday, we'd mentioned that this was designated officially as an area investigation. We had our Air Force reconnaissance aircraft wander into that puppy earlier today, and they did find a weak closed circulation center, albeit very weak, still very ragged, very disorganized, nothing worth highlighting just yet, which is why they simply nudged our probabilities up just a little bit. We're now at a 50-50 reservoir. We are now at a 50-50 ratio over the next 48 hours up to the next 7 days. We don't have 7 days with this system. So if anything, we should be paying much more attention to that 50% chance of formation in the next 48 hours because we only have about maybe 24 to 36 hours left to spend with this thing. It might try to fly under the radar and steal the name Barrow before crashing into the uppermost apex of Florida, the southeast quadrant of Georgia, and then completely washing out. Some model indications and some ensembles do want to take it back towards the east-northeast and eventually up the coastline. That's neither here nor there, though. By then, it'll already be a baroclinically forced system. Nothing to really be concerned about. It'll just be a rainmaker, like a pseudo-nor'easter up there for the northeast as it rockets out through the greater Atlantic waters. Alberto, didn't start with Alberto because we have officially gotten the last advisory on Alberto. I swear, guys, if that is an indication of how fast time is going, then I don't know what is. I feel like for the longest time, we were building up for the whole June 10th through the June 21st time frame we'd been talking about on this channel for such an extended period of time. And then just like that, Alberto's gone. Done. Out of the picture. Remnants of Alberto, it completely was ripped apart as it moved over those higher terrain features. Like I said, a very disgusting mess on satellite imagery. Lots of rainfall still ongoing. And we have this sucker coming in right behind it that could potentially take on Invest 93L over the next 12 to 24 hours. We have our area of vorticity advection beginning to wander its way up from Central America over the Yucatan and Willa Verge. I can't talk tonight. It will emerge over the Bay of Campeche as we start the day tomorrow, if not during the day tomorrow. So that's that. We have our 2 orange blips. This may go red. This is definitely going to go red. I'm fairly confident that this disturbance number 2 in the BOC is going to go red sometime in the point of the day tomorrow. This is still up in the air. It could go either way. I would not be surprised if we do get a number on this. Tropical Depression number 2. Would it be number 2? Because we had PTC 1. Would this be Tropical Depression 1? That's why I don't like PTC. PTC just kind of dorks it up. I don't even understand why we introduced potential tropical cyclone. Just make it a disturbance or make it a depression. It's like we're forgetting about the natural course of a tropical cyclone. When you throw potential tropical cyclone in the mist and you start telling people, well, what is it? Is it a frontal system? Is it subtropical? Is it tropical-ish or something like that? Tropical-esque? What is it? So I could see this going either way. We are literally at a 50-50 shot, and when I say 50-50, I don't mean the formation chances. I mean we're 50% of the way there, 50% not of the way there. So I don't know. I would not be surprised if we see a tropical depression out of this, but that's neither here nor there. Let's switch on over to the satellite image before I talk too much. Couple of areas of note. Obviously, this is Alberto. That's what's left of it. You can see it just raining out. As I'd mentioned previously, as soon as it wandered over the lee of the mountains there, over those higher terrain features just to the immediate west of the coastline of Mexico, completely shredded, and there's no sign of a discernible circulation center. All that upper-level cirrus and rain shower activity is still collecting over the mountains, but as soon as it gets to the windward side of it, nothing. We're just looking at a lot of showery precip, very high-level cloud cover that's slowly but surely dissipating and getting pulled up towards the north. It looks like we're going to get some monsoonal activity in Arizona in the Four Corners area. I saw National Weather Service Tucson had some monsoonal thunderstorms earlier today on their radar, which is pretty neat. I remember forecasting for those bad boys back in the day. This is what's coming up next, this massive entity here. Now, don't get it confused. That's not our whole disturbance, okay? We're not going to have just this gigantic, almost semi-continental low-pressure system that's going to try to consolidate into a storm. No, that's not the case. We're watching for vorticity that is embedded within this gyre. As it circulates around, the CAG has not disappeared. The CAG is still there. This is what the Central American gyre spat out and continues to ricochet off towards the west. We're going to get something else ejected out of it, and it's going to pretty much take on the same general trend, which I actually want to talk about that very briefly tonight. We're going to talk about that towards the midway of the run or the midway of the briefing, but there's something that I remember you guys, I'd mentioned that we're at the point in time now to where instead of looking at Climo data, looking at models, looking at seasonal outlooks, we can start verifying. And there's one piece of the puzzle that has been verifying both in a good and a bad way, and I'll talk you through it in a second. Here's Invest 92L, that little small bubble of convective activity. It has consolidated a little bit. I mean, if you guys look, it's tiny. We were anticipating it would be very tiny, but it has consolidated ever so slightly. Like I said, we have that closed low-level circulation. The thunderstorm activity in its very close proximity to its center. Not the most appealing storm, not the most appealing at all. You'd look at that and think that it was just residual thunderstorm activity off of this front or off of that trough that's continuing to eject out into the greater Atlantic headed towards the Azores at this point. But that's our Invest, and it still has a possibility of trying to spin something up. And then we're also going to turn our attention out to here. We have to watch the main development region. We really do. Not for anything catastrophic, not for anything big, but we're still continuing to see those breadcrumbs slowly but surely piling up as we go day to day. Let's continue. So we haven't looked at this in a little bit. We have not looked at this for a little bit, and I forgot that this was issued a couple days ago. I believe this was back on, when was this issued? 18th, so only 2 days old. We haven't talked about this yet. You could see that we are looking at a drying trend over the eastern and central United States thanks to that bona fide large-scale ridge. And then there's our 20+% chance of tropical cyclone development still out there all the way to July 2nd. Keep that in mind as well, all the way out until July 2nd. And then just as we've been alluding to, as well as a couple of other weather channels on YouTube, we're going to shut down for a temporary period of time. And in fact, you can see across the spectrum, honestly, it looks like the eastern half of the globe is going to close off. We're going to see drier and more below average activity for an extended period of time. And that's because of those velocity anomalies we've been talking about. So let's keep going, shall we? You can see again over the next 72 hours, we are bullseyeing that area in the Bay of Campeche, the BOC, the BOC. We have the CAG affecting the BOC, and the just kidding. I'm not going to start saying dumb things like that. Dotes McGoats, hi Nazar, first time been able to catch a live stream since last season. That is true. I do remember your channel name. I was going to say that username popping up right there looks very familiar. I haven't seen you in the chat in a while. Welcome back. It's good to see you. It's that time of the year again. We all got to convene for our good old tropical updates. You're not as exciting of an update as yesterday. I wish there was a bit more to discuss, but you know, we're still rocking through it as is. So this is still maxed out for certain. Fully maxed out. We're at that 99.9% chance over the next 3 days of tropical genesis. If you come over to the tropical storm probabilities very quickly, you can see that those areas are also surging up as well. Are they? Is that broken? Okay, never mind. Wow. So the year, never mind. I lied to you guys, and I'm sorry about that. I could just, why is this blank? That is very weird. Why is that blank? And why is it only showing at the end of the run? That's interesting. Okay, well, anyways, we're still maxed out. Confidence is fairly high out here that we're going to see a tropical cyclone forming up. Very, very, very reminiscent to what we just saw with Alberto. Almost the exact same characteristics, the exact same upper level pattern, the exact same steering current, which we will allude to a little bit further on, like I'd mentioned before. Tropical depression probabilities have only sank for our system in the southeast because at this point it's onshore. That's why. Don't get discouraged. At 0Z, we saw a huge surge in the probabilities over the next 72 hours. Once the 0Z model comes up, there you go. You can see we went all the way up to just under 80%. 75 to 80% chance of tropical depression development, tropical cyclone genesis, right off the immediate east coast of Florida to the north of the Bahamas. At 12 Zulu, the only reason why this has shrank so much is because at that 72-hour mark, we're done. That thing is already inland and dying. And then we have to turn our attention down there to the southern Caribbean. You notice that there are a few amplified waves that are being signaled by the European model, still seeing a decent vote of confidence that something is going to try to manifest itself right around that June 26th to the June 28th time frame. I'm still very wishy-washy on that. It might be just fatigue from tracking Tropical Storm Alberto, obsessing feverishly over Invest 92L, and what else could be possibly surfacing immediately after seeing the landfall of Alberto, but still worth watching. We have a lot of different models that are agreeing that something could try to move its way up through there. The trick is whether or not it's going to be able to remain over water to form anything up, or if it's going to interact with land far too much until it once again pops out over the BOC. That's like been the general trend here, very 2010-ish almost, if you ask me. And then at 216, 240, and especially 264, I'm really noticing that the chart gets a lot more cluttered up, and this lines up excellently with the upcoming phase and the very tail end phasing of our MJO and our favorable upward velocities. We're finally going to see that Central American gyre dissipate. We're going to stop hogging up all that convective instability. It'll finally transition and plop itself over the greater main development region, and the models they're slowly catching up. I'm noticing as I've really began to investigate these things. Last year I didn't. Obviously this YouTube channel came into fruition just before Idalia, so put that into perspective. I wasn't really digging into the models to this level of scrutiny, almost like this is a full-time forecasting job, 24 hours of the day. I'm starting to notice the biasing. I'm starting to notice the latency in the signaling and how things tend to catch up. It's almost like a supercell. I know that sounds weird of a metaphor, but hear me out. You have your large-scale dynamics, and they start to bleed over and phase through the pattern. We're talking macro-scale, if not full-on hemispheric patterns, like our PNA, North American oscillator, and the NAO, the PDO, the ENZO, etc. And then as we go through time, our models finally catch up a little bit. And that's why I use the supercell adage, because obviously with that wind shear, it tilts everything. You have your tornado down in this direction, but then you have all your precip displaced to the back end. Kind of the same thing if you're looking at it from a numerical model perspective. You have all your large-scale phenomena that creates your favorable window, and then as things trickle through, that's when it really begins to, kind of appear for itself. What I'm getting a little more concerned about is the fact that here we go. This is also what I wanted to show you guys as well. If you look, we are sitting right over top the Caribbean, Central America. That's where that gyre is. But then here in the next couple of days, there's June 25th, June 30th, or through June 30th, through July 5th, through July 10th, and even through July 15th. Our MJO is going to slowly wander through before resetting itself out in this general area. And that's when we can quiet down. So between this time frame to about here is when we have our greatest opportunity at trying to get more of an aggressive wave to see exactly what happens in the grand scheme of things. You can see that as well on our European... Wow, I just had a brain fart. Good Lord. Let me take a sip of water. Collect myself. I don't know what just happened there. Burnout. Pardon me. You can also see this on our European ensemble product here for our velocity potential. You can see as early as the next couple of days this weekend, we're going to start seeing that phasing shift out there over the greater Atlantic. You can start to see those green shades finally transition from the BOC, the Gulf of Mexico, Central America, out into the Atlantic. And especially right about here, as we get ready to close out the month of June, we really see an uptick in our velocity potential, our rising motion out there. This is erroneous. Where you see the green shading, what that tells you is you have diffluence. You have diffluence there. And so that's the good. That green means go, more or less. And then finally, as we rotate into July, there it is. We're smack dab under all that sinking air. Our MJO is positioned over all the maritime continents, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, Asia, etc. And that is one of the more unfavorable positions for it to help with inducing not only tropical wave activity for Africa, but anything out there in the tropical Atlantic. You want phases, I believe it's 2 through 4, 2 through 5, which is back a little bit further to the west. You want that over the Indian Ocean, over India, or the western half of Asia, the eastern half of Africa, the Middle East, etc. That's where you want to see it. If you go back in time, notice right about there, where you see a lot of that rising action right over India, the Indian Ocean, that's when you see a lot of the green stuff over the Atlantic. And as that phases through and you see it really set itself up over the Maritimes and over our ENZO 4 region, the Western Pacific, that's when we kind of just shut down. And notice everywhere, like on CPC's chart, for the second half here, everywhere is dry. Everywhere is dry. And PM, I also wanted to... I saw your comment earlier. You said CPC has us in Florida above average. No, they don't. If you look during the first and tail end, or the first front end of their chart, from the 26th of June to July 2nd, we're just hotter than average. And we have that tropical cyclone potential. And then as we go through these first couple of weeks of July, everything shuts down. We're either normal, neither here nor there, or we're drier for a large majority of the eastern hemisphere, which is crazy to say, but it's all due to these sinking motions. Here's a look at our 240-hour ensembles. You can see the ensembles are, they're trying. There's something there. There's still a signal that we'll need to pay close attention to. But this here is what we're really going to be watching here. Honestly, I'm getting so tired of looking at Invest 92L, this little baby storm. I'm almost ashamed of myself. Like, come on. Everyone and their mother has been talking about a hyperactive hurricane season. Why am I sitting here with a magnifying glass? Come on, 92. Come on, 92. You got it. You got to just keep going. Come on, just brew up a little bit. Come on, you got it. Just, come on, like stoke the flame. I don't know why, but I'm literally sitting here scrutinizing this thing under a microscope, and it's literally this big in the grand scheme of things. But we still have a bit of a signal out there, so anything's possible over the next 24 hours before it begins its land interaction with northern Florida, southern Georgia, and then we're gone. Then, as you can see here, the ensembles want to race it off towards the northeast as a more jet-supported baroclinic system like we typically see. Does the MJO influence our afternoon storms in Florida? Hive, I would say no, obviously. There's probably a small chance. Naturally, it helps to create a bit of a greater, larger spectrum of instability, helps to generate a little bit more moisture. So I suppose to a level you can argue the MJO does create favorability for our daytime thunderstorms. But, that's when we're really beginning to look at too big of a picture, and we need to look at our localized phenomena, our localized environment to determine the weather here in Florida, especially for the summertime. That hazards map is wrong. How is the CPC hazards map wrong? Let's go ahead and open up this link real quick, shall we? Oh, well, yeah, this is for the very beginning and the very tail end of June and July. And we're modestly above average as we finish up all that tropical activity out there in the Gulf of Mexico. But then after that, we're drying out. I wasn't mentioning any time here in the near distant future that we're going to dry out. I was mentioning as that unfavorable phase comes through. But anyways, if you take a look at our European ensembles with that pressure biasing, I want you guys to look closely down here more than anything. I mentioned a number of times that the signaling is what you really want to pay close attention to. Mark from Hurricane Track said that there is a chance for tropical cyclone before landfall. Yeah, no, and I agree with that. I think I watched his video earlier today, yeah. I agree with it, for sure. Who's asking for hype in the channel? I didn't see that. Oh, yeah, I see that. I'm sorry. Michael in the chat. Who said that? All right, anyways, I'm getting distracted, and I want to make this a little bit shorter than ordinarily because there isn't too much to talk about, all right? So if you look at the weather models ensembles, there's our second system, and that signature is getting more and more weaker. It's weakening as it goes through time. If you come back, we'll go back as far as 18 Zulu, or the 18th at 12Z. Notice how much larger the signal is there for at least a decent tropical storm. You go to 0Z on the 19th, still some agreement, but more gray than there is green. Then you go to the 19th at 12 Zulu, still seeing green, but a lot more gray. And then finally today at 12Z, far more gray. Confidence is just slowly going down. And I want to say this is probably because, unfortunately, this is a Central American gyre situation. And it's going to be a very tricky forecast. I think the amount of gray hairs that I can subliminally feel manifesting on my head is a direct result of this Central American setup. Wasn't as cut and dried as Idalia last year. Idalia, I want to say, was more of a specialty storm, and given the time of year, she had climatology on her side. In this case, you have the homegrown, home front June climo coupled with a Central American gyre, and that's just chaos. I don't want to forecast for something like that ever again. I mean, we got it for the most part, but good Lord. Battling the folks saying that we were hyping and battling all the different model runs and confidence going up and down like a flicking roller coaster. Shoot. Anyways, there's a little bit more confidence there that we're going to see something else begin to form up. This is what I was talking about. If you look at the timestamp, right around the 27th or the 26th through the 28th and into the very tail end of June, we're seeing a bit more of a spike in confidence. And then as you go even further into the run, that MDR signal is not stopping. And I want to say, again, Lesser Antilles, particularly the Windward Islands. I've had a slow but steady uptick in my viewers down there asking, hey, does Trinidad, does Tobago, does Barbados have a chance at seeing some action? 110%. That is something that I am not afraid to announce. I got a weird itch on my back, and I'm trying to itch it without making it awkward. That is something I am very, very, very confident in. I'm very confident in that. And that's not scare tactics, not fear-mongering. That's me being legitimate and upfront with you. Yes, I'm not going to hit you with possibly. We could possibly, maybe, could potentially, in some sort of a way, finagle. No, it's yes, you're going to get action, whether it be in the form of a wave, a disturbance, all the way up to an organizing tropical cyclone. It's obvious, and I'll show you exactly why. Not only are we continuing to see an uptick in our overall ensembles, pinging on something, wandering out of the MDR, right as that MJO phase comes through, it's going to track to the Lesser Antilles before it becomes a bit more difficult to track. Like I said, this is zero barrier. The Lesser Antilles are our front lines, and then we have the U.S. British Virgin Islands, which I know are technically a part of the Windward Islands, then in Puerto Rico, and it's off to the races from there. But zero barrier is going to be right around that 70-degree longitude line. Because if you notice, if we go back to when we did our briefing yesterday, 19 at 12 Zulu, see how there's a lot more divergence in those ensembles right as you hit the 70-degree west longitude. From 60 on, you're fairly converged right there. Lesser Antilles are going to see something. They're going to see something. And then from there, we become a lot more widespread. And I personally, the more I look at our trends in terms of our upper-level steering and our mid-level currents across the entirety of the North Atlantic, I'm definitely seeing a lot more potential for things getting into the Caribbean. So I can say with a bit more confidence than I had even yesterday that as we get closer to seeing something potentially working its way in, this time of the year, and especially August and September, the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, we really need to keep our heads on a swivel. I'm not saying you're going to see a hurricane. I'm not saying you're for certain going to be hit hard, but all I'm saying is the potential for something finding its way in there is much, much greater. And that kind of alludes to the conclusion of this live stream here in a second. If we switch over to our GFS at 12 Zulu, you can see the same thing. General takeaway is something is going to make its way towards the Lesser Antilles, albeit the GFS does not have as much of a vote of confidence. Favorability still stays out there over the Western Caribbean, where a third system can try to come up from the Gulf of Mexico or from the Caribbean into the Gulf of Mexico. So Louisiana, the Gulf Coast states, you're not out of the woods just yet. We still have this next rainmaker to get through, and then possibly before we roll into the 4th of July holiday, we might have one more sneaky area of vorticity that we need to watch. So with that being said, let's get into steering. So why am I so overtly concerned? Why am I... I'm going to say it. I'm just going to say it. Why am I hyping the Caribbean? Well, it's the writing's on the wall. And I'm going to take you through the reason why it is. So if you guys recall, our climatology models have been calling for large-scale anomalous ridging over the north and eastern United States and lots of ridging over the Atlantic, starting as early as June, July. Well, we are seeing it. That forecast is verifying fairly well. These are our 850 millibar control winds for the entirety of the North Atlantic, and I want you guys to look very closely at our prevailing patterns here. The trade winds are ripping, as Dr. Reed Timmer would say, right along the equatorial tropical region, coming right off the western coast of Africa, moving through the Caribbean, and then right up into Mexico. And notice that this is generally where we've seen all of our tropical activity. They're flowing pretty much due west, maybe a little more west-northwest as they come up into the Gulf of Mexico, the BOC, the BAC, and then they crash either towards southern Texas or the east coast of Mexico. There's a reason for that. And if you notice, even this early in the chart, we're only 36 hours into the model run, you can see gigantic ridge right through here, a little bit of a weak spot brought on by a minuscule trough in the mid-levels, and then more anticyclonic ridging out there over the rest, right over top the Azores and just off the coast of Spain, Portugal. So this general trend here is going to keep everything not only suppressed towards the south. It's another thing I want you guys to notice here is with this huge area of erroneous or anomalous ridging like so. That's our ridge, ladies and gentlemen. We have an A there and we have an A there. And if you streamline it out, sure, you have a bit of a call, a neutral point right in between the two. That's how you can delineate between the two separate systems. And then your streamlines come back this way, streamlines come back that way. If you streamline it all together generally, you follow the streamlines that are on the chart, your prevailing pattern is going to keep our ITCZ, those waves down towards the south, right around that 10-degree latitude line. They're going to stay down there. They're not going to get too heavily hit by our Saharan air layer as we wander through July. Obviously, we have other objects in motion, so there's, the SAL is almost the least of our concern right now, but that is also going to drive them towards the Lesser Antilles and into the Caribbean. Big bubble, no trouble doesn't only necessarily equate to good weather up here, but it's also going to keep all the bad weather sandwiched down to the south. Brian Shields on his channel says it all the time, the blocker. And there it is. It's in full effect. If you come over to I believe I have 500 millibars up next. Yes. We have 500 millibar height anomalies here. You can see very weak trough makes its way out of there, and then just boom. We have a little bit of a trough here that tries to disturb the pattern just a little bit, but then look at this enormous ridge still in place over the Atlantic, and a ridge very quickly building in and back over the United States right there. This is exactly what our climatology models have been screaming in our faces, so we may not have nailed the ENSO. The ENSO is neither here nor there. We're in a neutral phase, but the ridging is right on target. Just nothing but anomalous ridging. So truthfully, like I said, it's good news and bad news. The good news is, for the time being, bad for you guys down there. Don't get it twisted. The double-edged news is what we'll call it. The double-edged news is all the stuff that comes off of Africa and manages to survive its trip over the tropical Atlantic is going to bring a lot of activity, a lot of rainfall for the Windward Islands over northern South America. Central America's flood risk is probably not going anywhere anytime soon, at least for the next couple of weeks. And then down here, areas that have been seeing a lot of flooding, that's just unfortunately the prevailing wind flow. all right in through there. It doesn't even need to be tropical. Just all that moisture is just going to funnel right underneath our ridge. We have a lot of subsidence to the north. We have our dry air creating localized high pressure. So it's just going to keep moving in that direction. Like I said, the bad news, the flood risk for our folks here. The good news, with all this land interaction, we're not quite ready to see anything coming up and moving into the Caribbean and actually manifesting itself into a massive cyclone and making a run for the Yucatan Channel like we saw back in 04, 05, 2020. We're not there yet. The bad news is, so that was the double-edged news. The bad news is, climatologically speaking, and I've been doing a lot of studying on this and talking to a number of folks with a lot more experience than me, the bad news is, with such anomalous ridging this early in the hurricane season, as we climatologically expect the ridging to break down, what I have a bad feeling is going to happen is we're going to continue to hold our ridging here, but our protective negative PNA here is what's going to go away, and we're going to see a shift from this to a shift to this. And that's what I'm afraid of. Like I said, 70 west is going to be our area, our zero barrier for my Armageddon fans out there. Lesser Antilles, the front lines, the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas, the Mid-Atlantic coast, to about Louisiana. These long trackers are going to need to be watched, for sure. Are definitely going to need to be watched. And this kind of backs up what I was mentioning here. If you notice, this is our European Ensemble PNA. You can see as that trough works its way through the trough I showed you guys in the 500 anomalies, we're going to have a bit of a window to go neutral, if not into a slight positive PNA, which means troughing over the east, ridging over the west. We're going to switch up for a brief window of time, and then look at how we go right back in to a dominating negative PNA, which means ridging up over the east, ridging over the Atlantic. Everything is coming through towards the west. You can see the same thing here if we look at our NAO. And the reason I bring the NAO up is because the NAO kind of goes in comparison to the PNA. They're teleconnections, as the naming of the charts here are, considered. You can see the trough comes through right at the same time as you saw it on our PNA charts. So you can see the ridge that is very strong near the, I want to say, Europe. You have the Icelandic low, and the high pressure near the Azores and Western Europe, is going to diminish a little bit as that trough works its way through. And then right on schedule, as we wander into July, we're going to have a robust NAO coming back in, which means a strong subtropical high over the Atlantic, strong pressure gradient to the north near the Icelandic low near Greenland. And as a result, we're going to reinforce that ridging over the Atlantic. So things are just naturally going to move towards the west, regardless of how you want to argue it. Here's a look at the Saharan dust. Everyone was talking Saharan dust, and truthfully, we really haven't seen too much of it. We've been a little bit below average. It's out there. It's definitely present, but it's below average. And like I was alluding to, because of our dominant ridging out here and out here, all that stuff is going to stay to the south. Notice our ITCZ is running right along the border of it. Right along the border of it. This is where our Saharan air layer is particularly stationed, and everything's going to stay to the south. So, very interesting to see there. I don't remember what I was going to pull up here. What do I have here? That's that. So, yeah, I guess that's it, everybody. That's all we got. We'll go back to National Hurricane Center before we get ready to close out. And that's all she wrote. I wanted to keep it a little bit shorter tonight, because we really don't have a heck of a lot to talk about. We do and we don't. We do in the sense of there is activity on the game board, but at the same time, we haven't seen Mother Nature make any recent plays, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. In the sense of the board is set, but the pieces have not been made. If you're playing a game of Armageddon, I read Hurricane Armageddon, Clipped Wing. If you're playing a game of chess, you know how obviously when you make your move, you tap the clock and you have the other opponent waiting to make their move and they tap the clock and it's your turn again. That's kind of the metaphor I'm trying to use here as an example. We've made the move of updating you guys, looking at the models. The models are moving. The models are in motion. We've tapped the clock, and right now we're waiting for Mother Nature to do something else. So that's that. Alberto is off the field. Alberto has already disappeared. He came and went very quickly. Beryl is up next, and we might have, is it Colin? I keep forgetting the names. Is it Colin is our sea storm? Could be sneaking in before we roll into the 4th of July holiday. whether it be down there in the... oh, that's what I wanted to show you. I'm sorry. So as we're wrapping up, if there are any questions in the chat, drop them in right now before we get ready to close out. And I just want to show you, I know that's the happy hour run of the GFS, but if you scroll through towards the midpoint of the run, see that? Starting to get signals. We're definitely starting to get signals. Every time I point these things out to you guys, I want you to remember that I'm not focusing on the one specific storm. I'm not focusing on just the one specific storm. What I'm focusing on is the signal. If you go back to the happy hour run yesterday at 18Z, that was not there. We had a bit of a convective feedback instance, but there was nothing there. If you go to 18 Zulu at that same time today, we now have a closed low pressure, and we have the vorticity there showing a bit of a weak tropical signature. And all I'm trying to emphasize here is as that MJO comes across, we're going to give this an opportunity to stir the pot a little bit. We're not looking at any Hurricane Ivans or Hurricane Marias. No, that's not the case. But we're just going to have a bit of a chance for the tropics to unlock in the greater Atlantic like they did with the likes of Brett and Cindy last year. This is right around the same general time we saw Brett and Cindy forming up, if you guys remember, in the 2023 hurricane season. El Nino shut them down as soon as they went into the Caribbean, all that outflow and sinking air. But the general takeaway here is, historically speaking, this is about the time where we try to get at least one feature that may make a run for invest, tropical depression, maybe a weak tropical storm. So we'll have to wait and see. Even looking at this, guys, before we close out, just take a look at how much ridging we have out there. This is an easy forecast. I know there's a lot of little weak perturbations out there, a lot of little short waves, inverted troughs, etc., but this is an easy forecast. And if you want to tell me I'm hyping or I'm fear-mongering, by all means do it. I will challenge you. I'll put the gloves on and I'll tell you why it is I'm saying the things that I am. Like, come on, anybody, look at this massive anti-cyclone. Just plain as day. Huge 850 cyclone or anti-cyclone. Anything that starts here is going to end up here, and then it's going to end up here. Like I said, negative, floods, big-time floods. The positive, we're not going to see substantial development because there's probably going to be too much land interaction for the most part. Where it gets a little tricky is we start playing that game of chess and the game of timing, and in a situation like this, you fast forward just a little bit, and this is what sources like Mark Sudduth, Brian Shields, who else out there is very good? Josh's Severe Weather. This is what all of us like to emphasize on our channels. David Schlotthauer, I see you in the chat as well. We talk about this stuff all the time. You got to watch for the timing. You have your prevailing pattern, and then you have your variability in the pattern. So, for example, we go back in time just a little bit. Boom, 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 boom. Very dominant ridge. This stuff is going to go like this. No harm, no foul. Maybe a disturbance, etc. That's cool. Lots of rain. Unfortunately, people don't need the rain. Okay, sure. We fast forward. Boom, 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 boom. Now this changes the script a little bit. Timing game. This is the variability that we like to talk about. I know that some of you guys will comment on a number of our different channels and say, oh, you really don't know what's going to happen? Well, we don't to an extent. We do, and then we don't. Because now if you look at the pattern, and I'll change the color, anything that comes out of here is going to go like this. See that? That's the variability, and if you look again very closely, and I'm not trying to gloat, I'm not trying to sound obnoxious, I'm not trying to make it sound like I know what I'm doing. Well, I mean, I do, but I'm not trying to make it sound like I know everything. But if you look at the subtle variability here, it lines up excellently with my zero barrier theory. The 70-degree longitude line is right around in through here, and notice that regardless of what happens over the eastern half of North America in the Gulf of Mexico, the Lesser Antilles are going to get it. Then from there, it becomes a game of time. Are we going to get a strong feature that's going to punch north? Are we going to stay weak and make it into the Gulf? But regardless, it's that 70-degree longitude line right around in through there. That I know a lot of folks mention 60-degree for ACE. Here in the Weather Center, I'm going to internalize and compartmentalize that 70 west, because right now I see a very, very aggressive ridge steering our waves west. It's from that 70-degree longitude line where it gets tricky. And that's why I emphasize that from the eastern half of the Gulf Coast to West Florida and up the mid-Atlantic, we need to pay attention. Because as this ridge develops that variability, and typically through climatology, we see that westward retreating towards the east, just in time for August, September, October, that's when that 70-degree longitude line is going to be even more critical. I'm telling you guys, I'm confident, very confident. I put money on it that the Lesser Antilles are going to see action. Not going to say a hurricane, but they're going to see action. And then from there, that broadens out, that spreads out. So there we go. Thank you all very much for tuning in tonight. It is Thursday night, Friday Eve for everybody. I hope that your week has been treating you very well. Look at that. We're still in a neutral. We're creeping back into a warm neutral. La Nina is just kicking it. She's hanging out somewhere. Not there yet. We're still in that neutral phase. But, yeah, guys, that's all she wrote. We're going to go ahead and cut the live stream. I'm 10 minutes over time, but you know what? It's always great talking to y'all, especially when we have a lot of information to pass along, regardless if it's the same thing, different day. That's neither here nor there. If you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, and I couldn't address you in the chat, I do apologize, but please leave me a comment in the comment section below. I forgot to say this at the beginning because we don't have very many in there. We had over 200 folks watching at one point, and we only have 61 likes. This is going to be the new catchphrase on this channel. Please give that like button a little nudge. Give it that friendly nudge. Okay, let's bump up the stats a little bit. I see other channels who are not really digesting a lot of this information and bringing it out to you guys the way that I am. And I'm not saying that maliciously, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm constantly burning myself out at, looking at time and time again, and other sources who know more or less the same information are broad brushing it for everybody, and they're making it a lot more if. They're making it a lot more if. No, I'm telling you when, I'm telling you confidently, I'm telling you yes and no, and when there is some variability, I will tell you there is a maybe. We'll have to wait and see. So please, if you could, give that like button a little nudge, a friendly nudge, just like we say out here in the tropics, and we will see you again next time. Tomorrow, if we do get some updates, I will make the sacrifice and we will do another live stream, whether it be in the morning or in the evening. It's probably not going to be in the evening, to tell you the truth. It's Friday night. As much as I love talking tropics with you guys, I just got a new barbecue and I'm trying to bust it in a little bit or break it in a little bit. So I'd like to do like maybe a little family shindig tomorrow night. So I will definitely keep you updated on our live stream status. If we wake up in the morning and there's viable information, we'll go live in the morning. If not, then, you know, we'll see you again very soon. We'll figure it out. So that's that. I do appreciate the folks in the chat right now. I do see that like button going up. Thank you very much for giving it that little nudge. And if you guys didn't catch the video that I made a long time ago, where I got that from is it's like one of my favorite parts in the Santa Claus 2, when Toy Santa is putting that little toy soldier in the machine, and he goes, I got a lot of priorities that I need sorting out here, so I need a little muscle. Or no, it's I need a little help. I need a little muscle. I need a little nudge, and that's where I got it from. Give it that little nudge. So you guys are the little nudge on this channel. And I really sincerely appreciate all the support, the commentary, and the just appreciation and the camaraderie that we have in our live streams. It's amazing. It's fantastic. Like I was mentioning in some of the comments I was responding to earlier today, it's not just about the weather information. It's about the community. It's about the people. It's connecting people for the common goal of getting the good information out there and staying safe when Mother Nature throws us curveballs and right hooks when we're expecting a left jab. You know what I mean? So we will see what happens. I'll be up at my usual bright and early time around 5:30 in the morning, and I'm going to go, like I said to you guys before, I'm going to open my eyes like this and start looking at models, and I'll make the determination right then and there if we'll do another quick live stream tomorrow morning. I really don't want to get you guys' hopes up. I really don't think I'm going to be doing an evening live tomorrow. I really don't, and that's just for my own mental sake. If there is stuff to talk about, I might give myself a little nudge and get on here, but we will see. Please don't hold me to that, and don't get upset if we're not here. I don't want to waste you guys' time either. I love talking, but I don't want to waste the time, and if there's not much to say, I'm not going to just get on here and spew the same thing at you either. Extremely redundant. So we'll see what tomorrow morning has in store for us, and I will keep you guys updated. Thank you very much for giving that friendly nudge to the like button, and if you're brand new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button and turn your notifications on. Despite a little bit of that YouTube latency and getting those notifications to you, it would be great that you don't miss another future update, especially as we wander out of this active phase of the tropics into a bit of a lull, and then the main event will begin as we rock and roll towards August. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your Thursday night. Thank you so much for spending around 45 minutes talking tropics and listening to me rant and rave about the weather patterns like we always do. And we'll see you again extremely soon. I can promise you that. Remember, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the comments section down below. Drop me a line on my private social media, Instagram, X, TikTok. I make it a point to get back to everybody. And Amanda Kirby, thank you kindly for the $2 donation. I don't care how much it is. It could be a penny. It could be $100. It's going to mean exactly the same to me that you guys entrust me with your quality weather content and entrust me to give you the right information when you most need it. With that being said, guys, have a great rest of your evening. This is Weather Center Nazario.